Hey there, good morning. Welcome to Growth and Grace. This morning we're going to talk about delivering effective feedback without wavering on the feedback that you're giving. So this is something that's taken me so long to learn, and I've had a few different conversations lately where I've had the opportunity to give feedback, and so I wanted to share a couple different tips with you. A couple of them were business conversations, a couple of them were personal conversations. So here we go, we're gonna dive in. So first thing about delivering effective feedback is to make sure that you are clear on the feedback that you're giving. So if you're gonna take the time and effort and energy to give feedback to someone, make sure that you know what you're gonna tell them. Because if you don't know and you're just gonna kind of wing it, that's not effective. That's just winging it. And they might grasp one or two things that you're saying. They might be able to incorporate something that you mentioned, but it's really helpful to be super clear on what kind of feedback you're going to give. And for me, and you might have a different process, for me what it looks like is having a bullet point list of like, okay, I for sure want to touch on these three things. And then if other things come up in conversation, great. And if not, I for sure know that I touched on the three main points that I wanted to bring up. So what this, like one example of this is that if you guys have ever done anything online or ordered any like graphic design or anything on Fiverr, it's a website where you can go and you can go order any different types of stuff. If you need a logo designed, if you need a book cover design, if you want like whatever, you can go get it done on Fiverr. And most of the time when you purchase something, it comes with, I'm going to give you 2 different options to choose from, and then 4 sets of revisions. So you can go back and forth 4 times to give revisions. So you want to make sure that your feedback is super clear and that it's effective, because you only get a couple shots at getting it revised to where you really like it. So I was working with a friend the other day, and he had a couple different logos that he was trying to have designed inside of Fiverr, and he was running into this whole like, oh my gosh, the deliverables came back and they weren't what I was thinking, and they didn't include as many options as it said that they would include, and I don't feel like they really heard what I was saying, like they didn't really do it right. And so he showed me what his original request was, and then he showed me what they delivered. And so together we came up with the feedback that he could offer that was clear, it was concise, and it was very direct and very professional. So we went through and we wrote, hey, so-and-so, thanks so much. I want to make sure we're on the same page because I know your package includes 5 options. And the zip file you sent only included 1. So if you could please resend the zip file, that would be super helpful. And since I've seen that one, here are a couple things that I would like tweaked on that version. And then so we drafted that together, and he was getting ready to send, and then he's like, oh, should I change this? Should I include this? Should I make this nicer? Like, should I do this differently? And here's what I want you to hear for this. So feedback is helpful. Feedback is helpful. If we don't get feedback, if we don't know what's going on or how people are responding or how we're responding to stuff, we can't grow. So just like when you go to the gym and you start to bench press something, if it's too heavy, the feedback is, wow, I'm not able to lift this weight. You're going and you're like, I literally can't budge this bar. Great, then drop the weight a little bit till the point where you can move it. That's feedback for you. That's telling you where your muscles are at. That's helpful feedback. Feedback is not meant to berate someone. It's not meant to tear someone down. It's not meant to make things worse. It is designed to be helpful. And there are obviously different ways of giving feedback, and I think we've all experienced receiving feedback that was not given well. That was maybe given in anger, maybe it was loud and it was yelling, maybe it was just totally out of the blue, out of context, and someone just like hits you upside the head with all of this feedback, and you're going, okay, first of all, where did that come from? What? And secondly, like, give me some context, because I actually don't know what you're talking about. right? Like I think people, I'm confident I'm not the only one who's experienced that kind of feedback. That's not helpful. That's not helpful. So a couple things to be aware of as you're giving feedback. One, be clear on what kind of feedback you're going to give. Two, make sure to do it when you're in a neutral space emotionally. So you're not delivering it in anger. You're not delivering it when your emotions are leading the way and you're feeling all, distraught. Figure your stuff out, work through it, however you're going to work through it. That's going to be a different Facebook Live. But figure your stuff out and come at it when you can give it from a neutral space so that it literally is just those bullet points of, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Hey, here's something that would be really helpful for me next time. When we're working through this, it would be super helpful if you sent me things ahead of time as opposed to trying to work through them in the moment. Whatever it looks like. Like, don't make it a big, huge thing. And here's the other piece to this, and we've touched on this in other Facebook Lives, is to start talking about it before it becomes a huge thing, right? So talk about it when it's a molehill. Don't wait until it becomes a mountain before you bring something up, because at that point, it's charged. At that point, emotions are raised. At that point, you're worked up about it, and you're like, you know what? If they don't freaking get this figured out, I'm going to be so upset. That's really not an effective spot to deliver feedback from, because now your emotions are in it. So deliver feedback when you're calm, and make sure that it's a good time for the other person to hear it. If they're rushing around, like going crazy and not able to focus, not a good time to give feedback. And I know how tempting it is to kind of try to sneak some feedback in, and maybe they won't notice. Maybe I'll just kind of, while they're busy, I'll just kind of, hey, maybe for next time you can blah, blah, blah. And then they'll be, it'll just soak in by osmosis. Wouldn't that be the neatest? But that's not how it works. And I think we all know that's not how it works. But I get how tempting it is to try to fold in the feedback amongst their busy hecticness. But that's not effective. You can certainly do that, but it's not effective. So why waste your time? I want you to be able to deliver effective feedback without wavering. So you're going to get clear on what your feedback is. You're going to come at it from a neutral space, and you're going to make sure that the person that you're sharing it with is ready to receive it. And here's another bonus tip, is to practice with someone. Like, just practice saying it, because if you're stumbling through it as you're trying to give feedback, that's not as effective as if you say it clearly and thoughtfully the first time around with the person that you're wanting to give feedback to. So grab a friend and say, hey, I got to give feedback to someone, and I'd really like to practice so that it comes across neutral. And then as you're practicing, you can be very aware if you're practicing and you're like, okay, so-and-so, I'd like to talk with you about this, and then I also want to talk about this, and then make sure we're going to talk about this, because when you do this, if you realize yourself starting to get into that emotional space, recognize that you're not neutral about it yet. And that's totally okay. It takes time sometimes. And wait until you're coming at it from a neutral space, and then actually go give it to the person that you're wanting to give it to. But practicing is super helpful, because it helps you. Sometimes we can think our way into thinking, oh, I'm totally ready for this. I can do this. This is no problem. I'm gonna be nice about it. I'll be professional about it. But at the end of the day, we're still actually really worked up about it. And then the feedback comes across with that charge, and that's not effective. So circling back, because I realized I didn't quite close the loop with that friend when we were ordering something on Fiverr, and he was like, oh, should I go back? Should I make it nicer? Should I do this? Should I change this? And I advised him not to go back and change anything, because at the end of the day, it's a professional email. It's clear, it's concise, it's to the point, and there's no need to floof it up with a bunch of sugarcoating and a bunch of, oh, you're so incredible, my gosh, this knocked my socks off, I can't believe how talented you are. By the way, could you make this little change? I just am so excited to show your incredible work off to people. Like, don't do that. That's not real. It's super fake, and it comes across as such. And it's not necessary. This is not like feedback is helpful, but feedback is not the same as like building someone up and encouraging them and like totally just pouring into them as in like a complimentary way or a recognizing their strengths kind of way. Feedback can be clear and concise and kind. Like you can do it in a kind way, but don't sugarcoat it. You don't need to make it all this whole big thing. You can be direct. And here's the thing. Okay. I already can tell that I'm going to get responses from this going like, but some people can't handle the truth. They can't handle it. They can't handle feedback. They can't handle it when I give it to them directly. They can't handle when I give it to them sugarcoat. Like they can't handle feedback. That's true. Some people can't handle feedback. I used to be one of them, so I get it. Like I used to be so offended if anyone would correct anything about my life, even though I was miserable in my life, even though I didn't like my life, even though nothing was working well in my life. Heaven forbid someone who cared about me actually come in and try to speak to me about it. I wasn't having it. I wouldn't hear it. I didn't want anything to do with it. I was so offended, and I chose to be offended, and don't talk to me about anything that you see that I could do differently because I don't want to hear it. But I didn't know that. Like it wasn't a conscious thing of like, oh my gosh, Susan, you're getting offended right now because they're giving you helpful feedback to try to help you get out of the scenarios that you're complaining about. Huh, imagine that. I didn't see it that way. So I get it. Some people won't receive feedback. At the end of the day, it's not up to you whether they receive your feedback or not. It's up to you to deliver effective feedback. And there are people who will not hear your effective feedback. Even if they're not offended by it, they still won't actually hear what you're saying. I get that too. I've been that person. I've been both sides with that person. So I get it. It's still up to you to deliver effective feedback. At the end of the day, if you have something in your life that's not working for you, if you're in a relationship where there's contention, if you are working on a graphic design project with someone and you have some feedback for the designer, if you don't give them the feedback, they're not going to make the changes. So it's up to you to at least do your part. And like I said, be clear on what you're saying. This doesn't need to be a 5-hour conversation. Make sure that you're neutral and you're coming at it from a space of being able to just say, you know what, this is fine. I actually do feel neutral about this. And then make sure that they're at a spot where they can, like, give them the best chance to be able to receive your feedback. Don't just try to sneak it in or sugarcoat it to the point where they're like not even clear because they're just so flattered. They didn't even hear the feedback that you had for them. These are real scenarios. So like be aware of what kind of scenario you're in and which kind of situation you find yourself in. Most of the time, I found myself in the situation of my little, I tried to do this on my phone earlier and it didn't work, but it's set up and now my little alarm's going off. Hang on, bear with me here. Okay, all right, this is my little wrap it up alarm, you guys hear it almost every week. But make sure, like, be aware of which situation you find yourself mostly in. For me, I found myself either staying quiet and not giving feedback because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feeling, I didn't want to offend them, and I didn't feel like I had a voice to speak up. So that was one scenario I found myself in. Once I sort of started finding my voice and I started recognizing, whoa, Susan, you can actually impact this by speaking up. Then what I found myself in was not understanding how to do it in a very effective manner. And this was me, you guys. Oh, you guys. I should pull some old emails to show you because I didn't know how to have conversations face to face. I was so intimidated by that. I was so, oh my gosh, there's no way I could actually talk to this person about this thing. And so I would draft an email and I call it an email. It was a novel. It was a novel. And I would tell all the reasons why I'm giving you this little bit of feedback. And here's all of the reasons why I'm giving this feedback. It usually doesn't matter. The backstory usually doesn't matter. And so don't lead with it, first of all. Like, give the feedback. And if the person has questions, it's actually their responsibility to ask the questions. And for me, what I was trying to do was preventing them from needing to ask any questions. Like, I'm just going to lay it all out for you here. And then if after reading you still have questions, let me know. But people aren't going to want to read that, especially if it's feedback that's not given effectively. And then it does feel offensive, or it does feel like, I don't even know why she sent this email. I'm super not clear on why this is being communicated to me and in this way. What in the world? So don't get caught up behind a screen to give feedback. If there's an opportunity to do it in person, take the opportunity to do it in person. But also recognize, so either maybe you're like me and you just haven't found your voice. So you're like, I'm not even going to speak up. Or you found your voice, but you're like, I don't know how to do it effectively. So I don't know what to do. In which case, rewatch this, because I just gave you some tips on delivering effective feedback. Or what was another scenario I would find myself in is, well, if I think of it, I'll share it another time. But there's like different things that you can be aware of as you're giving. Oh, I would give feedback from an emotional space. That's what it was. And so then it's not effective, because then it's just me like, here's all the stuff and all the reasons, and here's what needs to be fixed. And it kind of just makes you look really foolish. And by kind of, I mean completely. So don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. That's not effective. That's not helpful. Don't do it that way. So yeah, just don't. It just doesn't work. But stay clear on what your bullet points are. Make sure you're clear on which feedback you're giving. Come at it from a neutral space, and make sure the person's at a spot where they can hear it. That was another one. That was my fourth way of not giving effective feedback, is I try to sneak it in or sugarcoat it, or, fold it in and amongst all the other, like, here's a few things we're going to work on today and blah, blah, blah. And then, by the way, if you could just do this differently, that'd be super helpful. And here's some other things that it's not effective. So again, please learn from my mistakes. Please learn from what didn't work for me. And these are ways that you can give effective feedback without wavering, because you've done all the things to make it as effective as possible. The rest is on them. If they're not willing to receive it, that's on them. You can control all the things that we just talked about. You can decide which points you're going to talk about, and you can get clear on that. You can write them out. I write them out. I'll often have a list, a little note card or something, like, for sure want to touch on these points. And then come at it from a neutral spot. So sometimes you got to work through stuff before you have a conversation. And I know sometimes it's not ideal. Sometimes I would rather just go for it and get it over with, because, confronting anyone. And I'd rather have it be effective than confront them in an emotional state and then have to live with the consequences of, like, maybe you burned a bridge. So, which I've done. So also not effective. So don't do that. So I hope that this was helpful for you today as you're going through, and there's so many different opportunities and places and times when we have the chance to give feedback to people. So hopefully this helped you feel like, I can actually give effective feedback now, because I'm clear on what I'm talking about. I'm coming at it from a neutral space, and I've made sure that they're in the best possible environment to be able to receive this feedback. So with that, I will see you next week, Thursday, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, for our next episode of Growth and Grace. Until then, have a great day.